Trump has ordered a pause to all military aid to Ukraine, and it appears the reason is connected to that shocking Oval Office meeting last Friday. You probably remember it. Watch.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
The word from the White House is this, that the pause in aid will last until Trump can decide if Ukraine's leaders can demonstrate a good faith commitment to peace. One official saying in part, quote, "We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution." The dramatic move comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy headed back to Europe this weekend, where he was welcomed by leaders there who are now pledging to come up with a plan to end the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Trump continuing to insist that Zelenskyy, who he has called, quote, "this guy," does not want peace. And with us now is the Director of International Relations at the University of Southern California, Robert English. Professor, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us tonight. Let's start with that breaking news this hour. The U.S. pausing all military aid to Ukraine. What is your initial reaction to it?
Well, the hammer has come down, and Trump has now made good on what's been threatened for some time. That if Zelenskyy wouldn't accede to his demands, not just on the mineral deal, but on a broader peace settlement that's pretty disadvantageous to Ukraine, that he would cut off aid. And now he's done it. And now he has thrown the entire issue, for the time being, onto the Europeans, because it will be very difficult to replace that American aid. Artillery, missiles, air defense. It will be very difficult and expensive and take time. And there's not a lot left in the pipeline that Ukraine can continue fighting without, because it seems as if they're cutting off aid in the pipeline, not just future aid. So it will be felt right away.
What do you think this does to the U.S.'s standing in the world? I mean, one of the things I think a lot of people forget about, and I mentioned it last week, and I realized a lot of people weren't familiar with it, at least people I was speaking to, is that in the 90s, 1994, the United States, as well as Russia and the UK, they agreed if Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal, which was the third largest in the world at the time after the fall of the Soviet Union, that they would have some security guarantees and their sovereignty would be respected moving forward. Some people were asking me, well, if we had that agreement with Ukraine, why didn't the U.S. send support or money after Crimea was invaded and then annexed by Russia in 2014? And under the Obama administration, he was against sending javelins and lethal weapons, but they did send monetary aid. Is this something that would be seen by the rest of the world as a direct violation of a memorandum from the 90s? And could that impact the way the rest of the world trusts U.S. leaders going forward?
We're so far beyond the 90s agreements, right? I mean, you're correct in the broad sense, but right now, when you ask about the U.S. reputation and the U.S. standing as a global leader, right, it's happening in front of us. The issues that are shocking people are playing out right now. And clearly Trump sees it differently, right? He wants to push Ukraine to the bargaining table, and simultaneously, he wants to push more defense spending, more responsibility for the collective Western defense onto the Europeans. And he's trying to accomplish both at once and get a mineral deal at the same time. He does not see himself as abandoning Ukraine or the Europeans, our allies. He sees us as shifting the burden to them. But of course, he's doing it in such a brutal and shocking, sudden way that it is tremendously upsetting. But many Europeans themselves have acknowledged that they need to spend more. They just didn't want it to hit them in the face like this all at once.
Do you think the lack of U.S. aid can be made up by those in Europe? I mean, the UK, I almost said the United States, excuse me, but the United Kingdom announced that they were going to have a $2 billion loan to support Ukraine over the weekend. When you look at that, other European countries, Germany as well as Canada, do you think they'll make up for what the U.S. is not sending in a timely manner, in a way that Ukraine would say, okay, we can survive the lack of U.S. aid, or is this going to be detrimental to Ukraine's war efforts?
It's going to be detrimental to Ukraine's war efforts. It will be extremely difficult to make up some of the capabilities that only the U.S. can provide. Yes, the Europeans can scrounge up artillery shells. They can donate more fighter jets, although integrating those is very difficult. And small arms vehicles. They cannot give all the precision-guided missiles, HIMARS, ATACMS that the U.S. has. They do not have an equivalent of the Patriot air defense system. And what if Elon Musk joins in this cutoff and denies access abruptly to the Starlink satellite system that enables all of their communications and intelligence? This could be devastating to Ukraine's efforts if it is carried out in the shockingly abrupt way that seems to be threatened. No, the Europeans couldn't make that up, not in the short term, and maybe not even in the medium to long term.
If you're President Putin, what are you thinking watching all of this?
I'm happy. I'm happy because even if Trump is going to push me too in the eventual peace deal, and I'm going to have to give up a lot of money to pay reparations, or I'm going to have to give back some territory, right? Those concessions, those demands on Russia might still be evidenced. But in the meantime, all the big concessions are coming from the other side, and Trump is obviously pushing much more to get Ukraine to meet Russia than Russia to meet halfway. So, of course, I'm very happy, and I just hope it continues.
What do you think we should be watching for in the days and weeks ahead from this side of things?
Whether or not the United States, and I mean officials below the level of President Trump, who's so volatile and so, unpredictable in this and personal, people like Marco Rubio, the defense secretary, and mid-level officials can work with their European counterparts and smooth things over, meaning not see abrupt cutoff of aid, that this has just been a threat, but that it'll be resumed quickly if Ukraine makes some movement, right, towards that minerals deal, for example, that the European allies really commit to raising defense spending to something closer, at least to meeting the 2% target and maybe 3%, as President Macron himself has pledged. If we see those things really happen, you could see a new Donald Trump. He's so mercurial, and he could forget about past insults and be happy talk again. I don't think it'll be that happy an outcome, but I can see getting past this with some careful diplomacy and some movement on the side of the major world leaders. They're going to have to meet Trump halfway.
All right. Robert English, director of the USC School of International Relations, with us on that breaking news. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.